We open the Catechism to the first part, the part that is structured around the 12 articles of the Apostles' Creed. The Creed begins, I believe, and that is the title of the first section, I believe, we believe. And the first chapter is man's capacity for God. Note that whenever I use the word man or mankind, I'm referring to everybody. That's the language of the Catechism. Man is meant in the universal sense. This section, I believe, begins with a reflection on the desire for God that is within the heart of every human person. This section begins by noting that built into every human being is a desire for God, a desire that cannot be quenched by anyone else but God Himself. Man is created by God in His image and likeness, and man is created for communion with God. Think about the book of Genesis and how God interacts with Adam and Eve. There's a beautiful passage from Scripture that says that God spoke to Adam and Eve in the garden in the cool of the day. It's a phrase that has within it that sense of communion, that sense of closeness. This is indeed how man is created, for communion with God. Man is created by God and for God, and God never ceases to draw man to Himself. Only in God will he find the truth and happiness he never stops searching for. This is paragraph 27. There are so many forms of religious experience throughout history. They're many and they're varied, but they are so universal that one can call man a religious being. Down from the very beginning, man has had something within his heart that has caused him to reach out and to seek God. We see this in cultures all around the world and down through the ages. The bond with God can be overlooked or rejected. We see this in our secular culture, our materialistic culture that seems to have left many forgetting about God. But God never ceases to call every man to seek Him so as to find life and happiness. God is always wanting to pull us back to Him, always respecting our free will in the process. To find God requires three things, according to the Catechism. It requires an intellectual effort. It requires our mind to be a part of this. It requires a sound will, a good heart, and it requires the witness of others. The faith that we receive, the belief in God and His teachings, are teachings that have been passed on from one generation to the next. St. Augustine says, "You have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in Thee." Only by resting in God can we find our fulfillment and our peace and our lasting happiness. Our hearts are restless until they rest in Thee, St. Augustine says. There are some ways by which we can come to know God. First of all, we can come to know God through our human reason, through the mind that God has given to us. From looking at creation, looking at the world around us, we can surmise that there is a God. Romans chapter 1, verses 19 to 20. Ever since the creation of the world, His invisible nature, namely His eternal power and deity, has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. Just looking around, looking at the beauty of a sunset, looking at the intricacies of a spider's web or a strand of DNA, we can surmise that there is a God, that His hand is at work. Through the years, there have been arguments for the existence of God based upon causality, meaning that something had to have caused everything to come into being today, and whatever caused that was caused by something else, and so on and so on and so on, until we get back to the first cause, who is God. Another argument for the existence of God is that on movement, that everything is in motion, whether it be physical motion or the motion of life. And there had to have been a first mover, a prime mover, to get everything started. There's also an argument for the existence of God based upon teleology, or purpose, just looking at the world and how it's made, looking into outer space at all of the planets and solar systems and galaxies. There has to be a purpose, a divine purpose. We can come to know the existence of God through our human reason, and from the nature of the human person himself. Think about how we are put together. Think about how we are wired, that there is an openness to truth and beauty. There's a sense of moral goodness, what is right and what is wrong. There is freedom and conscience. And there's also a longing for the infinite and a longing for happiness. This is from the Catechism, paragraph 33, that there is something distinctive about the human person that points to the existence of God. There is something that differentiates the human person from even the smartest creature that we could imagine, whether that's a chimpanzee or an orangutan or a whale. There's something different about man, that sense of wanting truth and beauty, that sense of freedom and the longing for the infinite. Now, our reason can discern the existence of a personal God, but to enter into real intimacy or closeness with God, God willed to reveal himself to man. And God willed to give man the grace of being able to accept this revelation in faith. In other words, from our reason, we can know that there is a God. But what is that God like? Is God good? Is God mischievous? Does God have our best interests in mind? To know something about the nature of God, God has to reveal himself to us. And so the Catechism, remember, in this section, we believe, I believe, begins with man's capacity for God, and then it gets into God revealing himself to us. The Catechism teaches about the knowledge of God according to the Church. The Catechism says that through our reason, we have a capacity to know the existence of God, and yet reason alone, hampered by disordered appetites and the consequences of original sin, is not sufficient to know the truths that concern the relations between God and man that wholly transcend the visible order of things. Men easily persuade themselves that what they would not like to be true is false, or at least doubtful. In other words, our reason, as great as it is not perfect. We can be deceived. We can be deceived. And through revelation, we come to know religious truth. In other words, God builds on our reason by revealing himself to us. Therefore, it's not reason alone that we know the nature of God, nor by faith alone, but reason enlightened by faith. Faith never contradicts reason, though it will transcend it. Reason can predispose or open one to an experience of faith. So how can we speak of God? Well, our language of God is limited, and so is our knowledge of him. We only know so much about God. We only know that which God has chosen to reveal to us. And so our language is going to be limited as well. We can speak about God only in accord with our limited ways of knowing and thinking. Our human words always fall short of the mystery of God, paragraph 42. And between Creator and creature, no sameness can be expressed without implying an even greater dissimilitude. We can reason our way to a knowledge of God, and we can use our human reason to know things about God, but through language we can only say so much. And this is why we fall back so many times on poetry. The language of prayer, the language of the Psalms, is that of poetry.